much. Well, the sea witch image came because my first book was published when I was 19 or 20. It was called Songs of the Sea Witch, and I'd been reading Robert Graves, and so she was a kind of muse figure that I encountered at Long Beach in those days. But as I got older, I remember when I was 45, I got a review saying I'd gone from a sea witch to a sea hag. It was in the Vancouver Sun. There were accompanying pictures from me when I was 19 and when I was 45. But the good thing was I got my own back because Matt Swyman asked me if I'd like to have a job writing for the Sun and what would I like to do, and I said poetry reviews. So I got the poetry reviewer's job because the one who called me a sea hag. He was let go. I think he had a problem with the drink. No names mentioned. You can come and ask me afterwards, I'll tell you. So in 2010, I wrote the poem, the equivalent of what Jesse read last night. I think it's the poem that's commissioned for the festival. And it's about this fish. His name is Fish. So the poem is called Campbell River, birthplace of Sir Richard Musgrave's Tyee. As a child, my soul oh, there's a typo in here. I'm reading from this little book, which is available for $20. And I'm going, oh dear. It should be, as a child, my soul claimed to glory, not my soul. Anyway, start again. But there are only 12 of these left, and I hadn't seen it, and it's the only place this poem is published, and I haven't put it in the book yet, so maybe the next one. As a child, my sole claim to glory was this big-ass fish, a 70-pound Tyee caught by my great-grandfather at Campbell River in 1896. A replica hung in the Royal Museum. On field trips, I lured my whole class to the glass case displaying the facsimile of the Leviathan my great-grandfather played for 3 days. In our family, it was legendary, alone in a boat at the mouth of what I imagined to be the deep, dark, green, mysterious Campbell River, all set about by cedar trees. Astute readers will recognize the allusion to, what's his name, Rudyard Kipling. Great green Limpopo River, all set about by cedar trees. I'm not very, I don't have a lot of literary allusions in my poem, but I was pleased with that one. A plaque acclaimed to be the largest salmon ever taken on a simple rod and line by Sir Richard Musgrave. Not only had my great-grandfather landed a fish heavier than me, plainly I came from royalty. How hard I fought to look and hold on to that vainglorious notion, the stoop-shouldered child I was, standing erect for once, head slightly bowed, nose flattened against the glass we were supposed not to touch, as the fish cast his cold eye on life, on death, and Mrs. Guest's combined grade 1 and 2 class. I envisioned my great-grandfather not stopping to eat or sleep for 3 days, intent on reeling in the mother of all Tyees, so that one day I might stand before it feeling as if, in a world that has never been my home, I was someone. I have since discovered that Sir Richard was not my great-grandfather after all, but his older brother. My lowlier ancestor ran sheep on Salt Spring Island. Nor was Sir Richard alone, but in a dugout canoe paddled by native guides from Cape Mudge before lunch. So much for family mythology, no more high-ass muck-a-muck. I have lesser claims to fame nowadays, but still, when I think back over those class expeditions and that vision I clung to as if my future depended on it, something glorious tugs.
Yes.
It sort of seemed sad and pathetic when I think about how proud I was of this fish. I guess I had nothing else in my life to be proud of, but it was, I don't know, it just stood for something. I had no idea what. And it turns out there are copies of it all over the world. There's one, because Julian Jameson, the Jamesons disinherited my family in Ireland. They have our family house. And he wanted this fish because it was his great-grandfather that got it. And I tried to get it from the museum to take over to Ireland, but by that time he had a stroke, and I don't think he wanted, his wife didn't want it in the house. Anyway, a big part of my life, this fish. So I'm going to read from Exculpatory Lilies. My favorite poem in here is called The Truth. And I tend to be, it's not something I like about myself, but I tend to be a bit of a know-it-all. Because I actually do know it all. My friends hate it about me because I tend to be right, and I don't want to be right or mean to be right, but if I'm not sure that I'm right, I don't say anything, but if I think I'm right, I do, and then I should just stop. Why do I want to be right? It must have to do with that fish. There'll be some childhood connection there. Anyway, so this poem is called The Truth. A hitchhiker I picked up a mile outside of Masset claimed he'd been enlightened by buttercups, so many that to stare at them too hard would have induced blindness. All day he had meditated by the ditch, and the moment I pulled over in my Jeep Cherokee, he knew he'd been blessed. He'd been waiting his whole life for someone like me. It crossed my mind to tell him those were dandelions, not buttercups. But how pleased I am with myself. I refrained. Well, for the one time I haven't corrected somebody, and I'm getting better at it. What does it matter if he thinks they're buttercups? In my mind it does, but I still get annoyed with that. I try to see humor in myself. If you can't laugh at yourself, you're pretty doomed, right? At least I would be. This poem called Humility. If I had to be the underwear of somebody famous, I would choose Leonard Cohen to wear me. I would want to be blue because blue's a color you could feel. And how do you think I would feel being so intimately associated with Leonard and his private, oh, this could so easily become a confessional poem, which it was never meant to be. I would want to be smalt, redder and deeper than azurite blue, more like the dusky purple I tried painting the bedroom one smoldering evening when the sun was going down and my lover had left town and Leonard was on the front lawn wearing nothing but me. Put my timer on. Okay. I actually cheated. They did a tribute to Gordon Lightfoot a few years ago for his 75th birthday, so I changed it from Leonard Cohen to Gordon Lightfoot for the poem and sent it off and they published it, and I feel really guilty. It's like, what's his name, who did Elton John, who did Candle in the Wind for Marilyn Monroe when Lady died. I thought he should have written a new song. Here I am doing the same thing. So, but at least I confess it, right? You confess your sins, that's a step. I spent quite a lot of time, when my first book came out, I moved to the west of Ireland, so I never read any of the reviews or saw what was happening. I was 20, I guess, because it was 1971. It was probably a good thing because, one of the worst reviews was in the Victoria Times columnist by Colonel Ward Harris. He called it Volumes of Rubbish was his title of it, and it was all about the poetry that was being published and Canada Council supporting these people, and that they led me to believe I was much more important than I was. Well, I actually didn't feel, except for the fish, that was important to me. I didn't have a lot of feeling of being important. But anyway, I missed all that, and my mother hid the reviews from me, of course. I thought that was, and my grandfather said, even after my first book came out, even Shakespeare had to write a lot of rubbish to begin with. So that was called, my family being supportive. But I'm proud of this poem too because it won third prize in a fish again. It's called the Fish Poetry Contest. It's from Cork. And Billy Collins, who's one of my favorite poets, was the judge. So I keep wanting to write to him and say, you gave me third. I said, who would do that? You gave me third prize. Third prize should have been first, but anyway, it wasn't. And it was COVID, so I didn't get a trip to Ireland to read it at the festival. And it's called Wild and Alone. Our first winter together, we rented Pilgrim's Cottage near Ballyconneely in the west of Galway. The wind-tormented days spent desperately burning turf. One night I found a mouse in the cutlery drawer feasting on crumbs and carried him out to the turf shed where I released him. Our ancient neighbor Val, who had not yet learned to trust light bulbs, had a great strength for the weakness, whiskey tasting of smoke, rain, and the road Atlantic Sea. I tried to pick a fight with Sean when he stumbled in late under our old neighbor's influence. So relieved he was alive, I wanted to kill him. Does it get any more romantic than that? He wouldn't fight back, picked up his book and pretended to read. I freed the frayed copy of Under the Volcano from his hands and hurled it on the guttering fire where it refused to burn, growing thickly black. I didn't know then our love was doomed to last. Watching as the mouse ran back up the path, I'd so recently taken through the open cottage door into the sacred heart of Mrs. Pilgrim's kitchen, where he resumed his meal as if to remind us interlopers, wild and alone is the way to live.
Yeah.
Oh, I lost a book. Okay, there's a bag behind me. Behind me. Behind you.
Okay.
Oh, the red book in it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, what I do is I'll send Oh, here it is. The red book. So, this is, I have to read this just because of what's going on with America and Canada right now. It's called Rest Area, No Loitering and Other Signs of the Times. It's commissioned by the CBC for the millennium when we thought the world was going to end. Remember, it was not going to, we weren't going to have 2001, but we did. Anyway, I read signs wherever I go, so this is sort of incorporating my compulsive reading of signs. Pick your rut carefully, you will be in it for the next 80 miles, warned a sign on a stretch of bad road near Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump, Alberta. I love my country, because even though we have been called the Vichyssoise of nations, cold, half French, and difficult to stir, we are honestly everything we pretend to be, one nation of 80 ethnic groups who still base our fashion taste on what doesn't itch. If the United States is like the guy at the party who gives everyone cocaine and still can't get anybody to like him, I could see into the future with this one. Prescient, right? North of the 49th parallel, where all our Christmases are white, Canadians are the life of the party. God gave us memories so we could have roses in winter, they say in Manitoba. But on Vancouver Island, we know the cold of a Canadian winter can kill even a memory. Gather ye rosebuds was my old father's best advice. The average Canadian considers life too short to stuff a mushroom, thinks poutine is French cuisine, is too polite to take the last piece of Christmas cake from the plate, the last pierogi from the pot. This is pop, because I'm supposed to say rot instead of pop, but that wouldn't work in the poem. It's supposed to be pot, not rot. It's popping on me. Where were we? The average Canadian says, I'm sorry, 4.8 times a minute. And I've seen a meme lately that says, I'm sorry, you're going to be sorry. So maybe we have another mode now. We are a self-effacing nation, a well-mannered lot. Americans say no to drugs, Canadians say no thank you. We are not elitists, says our new Governor General. This is outdated because it was, what's her name? Who was it? Adrienne Clarkson. Oh God, she came to my house once because Celia Duffy, who's a bookseller, was as a friend, and she brought Adrienne and John Saul for lunch. And I was away, so my husband Stephen Reed made them lunch out on the deck, and her comment after was, they keep it very clean. It was my house. I said I have the good housekeeping hobble seal of approval from her. We are not elitists, as our new Governor General, ask anyone who matters. Canadians are unarmed Americans with health care. A sign on the door of the Ontario Legislature reads, warning to all personnel, firings will continue until morale improves. Ed Fox says health nuts are going to feel stupid someday, lying in hospital dying of nothing, but the unarmed in Canada will be covered. If I had my life to live over, I'd live over Haida Bucks in Masset on Haida Gwaii, order skim milk latte made from organic shade-grown beans only. Whenever I felt lonely, I'd drive down to Margaret's Cafe in Queen Charlotte City, where a sign immemorial says, tomorrow has been cancelled due to lack of interest. I'd order spaghetti to go. What person on this planet can feel lonely while eating spaghetti? My new philosophy for the millennium: dread one day at a time. Wake up on New Year's Day and smell what's left of the roses. Pick your rut carefully, but remember, better to be behind a police car than in front of one. When you die, there is going to be a big vacuum in your life, so make hay while the sun still shines through the ozone layer. Raise a glass to the future, taste the stars.
Yes.
So my daughter Sophie died of an overdose of, I had a naturopath once who told me because my cat was hit by a car, and for 3 months, if somebody said hello to me, I'd start crying. I saved up all my grief. But the naturopath put this little seed in my ear, and she said, if you don't want to cry, just pinch the seed. And in fact, you can just pinch your ear. So I've learned to do that. So if I'm doing this a lot, it doesn't mean I have a terrible twitch or have a weird habit. It's because I'm trying to stop myself crying. There must be a pressure point there. Those of you who know about acupuncture. Very handy if you have to do public speaking and suddenly feel like you're going to cry at your own poem. It's not great. And there's no box of Kleenex here. Oh, there. Yes. Was that for me? Okay. Anyway, so I wrote a series of poems for her when, about 2014. She was, stay sane was all I could do. I had to kind of enter that world that she was in. And write about it. And I gave her a copy of it was a chapbook that came out, and she was always defended me. Mom can write about whatever she wants, because there were social workers who'd say, well, are you allowed to write about your daughter's suicidal ideation? I said, well, the poem's about mine as a teenager and how this has now gone into another generation. I don't see why I can. But yeah, there are people who tell you shouldn't write about certain things. So Sophie was always on my side. Anyway. It was a poem. We were driving up to catch the ferry at Port Hardy. We were driving. The heroin you'd stashed for the journey ran out around Nanoose Bay, where we pulled in at a rest area so you could do your last fix in the privacy of the blue Portaloo. I got out of the car to wait and found in the dead grass at the edge of the parking lot a suitcase full of someone else's life. Recipes, spices whose expiry date had been and gone, a bottle of vanilla extract, the kind I let you sniff when we used to bake cookies together. Lately you had taken to drinking the supersized containers I bought at Costco. You said it helped you sleep when the drugs ran out. I'd begun hiding it, and the knives I found in your bedroom under your pillow. I removed them without saying anything, so terrified had I become of your fate. In that parking lot, I unpacked cutlery, saucepans with lids missing a single baby shoe. I worked loose the knot on a bundle of unopened letters with footprints all over them, then stopped as you came flailing back to me because someone had dumped a lifetime of family photographs in the outhouse toilet pit, and up until that point, it was the saddest thing I knew. We got in the car and drove, trying to imagine. Had she been kicked out of her house, or had she run away? Maybe she chucked everything before checking into the rehab facility on the hill, hoping to start anew. I didn't want to go on. I wanted to turn back, open the letters, find a clue, a name and address to return the things to. But you said it was useless, and I could feel the panic rising in you. And I had little strength left at that time, and I was driving, and you need both hands to hold someone who is suffering and does not want to be held. I got through it.
Woo!
Okay, and this is postscript, September 14th. She died on September the 8th, 2021. And I was teaching at UBC where I teach poetry, and I didn't know I could take sick leave, so I was sitting in the parking lot outside the crematorium responding to people's poetry when she's being cremated. And you know how Facebook, if you talk about buying a rug with your friends, we go home and on Facebook there'll be all these ads for rugs, even though you just bought one. Well, I bought her a black hoodie to be cremated in, and this came up on my Facebook page, the line in the poem. The day you are cremated, a girl modeling a black hoodie like the one I've chosen for you to wear lights up my Facebook page. I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around me. I hear you laugh at the irony as they fire up the retort. A laugh dragged through the ashes of 1,000 cigarettes, tokes of crack, my sweet, dangerous, reckless girl. What could I do but weep? The way I did when you were 4, butting out a Popeye candy cigarette you scored from the boy next door for showing him your vagina through the split cedar fence. I told you, next time, baby, hold out for a whole pack. Trying to be brave the way only a mother could. Now I carry you home in a plain cedar urn, the remains of all you once were reduced to the smaller portable size. Not even you would survive the fire this time. You're light in ashes now, formless as the divine. Two more poems. I mentioned last night I read my new sock poem I sent to Sean Virgo, who's my editor. He said, the last 2 lines don't seem in the same voice, and they were my favorite lines. You know that happened? He's always right. So of course I looked at him and thought, no, it's like kill your darling. You have to get rid of what you love the most. But anyway, my husband, I mentioned that he'd written a piece for Playboy called The Last Heist, and what I was referred to as one of the most beautiful, intelligent women on the planet. And so I used to have that as in my notes for reading hosts, but then the host would always read this, and the audience would be looking at me wondering if Playboy had revised their idea of ideal beauty. I stopped using that quote because otherwise people were going, oh. Anyway, Stephen didn't meet very many women in prison because there were only the guards, and so that's why I got to be so brilliant and beautiful. And he also thought I was, but he was fairly deluded, even though he was lovely and loved me. But anyway, so socks. Yes, so this is my poem for him called A Condition Incompatible with Life. You've been gone 5 years now, and your socks are starting to wear out. I say gone as if you had slipped down to the local and never returned. The barkeep remembers you came late after the lunch crowd had left. You had your own table, sat in the same chair, and ordered a vodka tonic, always a double. She must have seen the question on my face. You weren't supposed to know, she said. At first I would joke, I lost a husband but gained a hodgepodge of socks. You liked socks that made statements, that said gone are the days of matchy-matchy classic Argyle polka dots or white tube socks. Why be boring when you can wear a pair that peek out from your pant leg, nervy, skateboarding gorilla socks, bacon and egg socks, an odd sock missing its counterpart, don't follow me, I'm lost too. I cut a swath, you said, describing how you had dressed for a friend's funeral, a silk scarf, cashmere coat, brushed leather kicks, an infinity sign socks, those irrefutable 8s. That last week I watched you struggle. I didn't offer to help because it would have hurt your pride if I had said, here, let me pull up your socks because you can't reach your feet. They have discovered I am diabetic, you said the day before you died, but that should change once I stop pounding back the tonic water. At the fire ceremony we held for you, I placed a Mickey of vodka, a 6-pack of Fever Tree Light, and a pint-sized bottle of mouthwash on the table beneath your photograph. I told everyone I had created a new cocktail in your memory, vodka tonic with a chaser of Listerine. I found scores of empties in the shed where you stacked firewood and the mouthwash because I wasn't supposed to know. At least they were Mickey's he was trying to cut down, I said, as everything you possessed was consumed by flames. Except for your socks. I couldn't bear to see them burn. And your slippers too. I set them beside your bed where you will be able to swing your legs over the side and bury your feet deep in the plush black sheepskin the way you always did. You cut a swath through our lives, but you can come back now, anytime, no questions asked. And my last poem, which is again a new one too, is called Quite the Confession. Quite is spelled Q-W-H-I-T-E. And like I grew up in Victoria in the days where there were no people of color whatsoever. I didn't ever see any. Well, we had one Chinese gentleman who delivered our vegetables, Mr. Lee, apparently quite a famous character. And I have a friend on Hawaii who's an architect who's African Canadian, and he started calling me and all the different words I use, and at first I got really resentful. Again, I don't like to be told I can't use a word or can't do something, but it made me think a lot. So the poem is for him, and there are two quotations to begin. One is, I try to avoid calling things that aren't actually slavery, because most days accuracy is all I have left. It's Saeed Jones, and Hyde legend, a white raven helped bring the sun, moon, and stars to earth, but turned black when it brought fire to humans. So it's really a poem about the kind of racism I grew up with, being a white person in Victoria, and not the kinds, well, it's all here. Somewhere beyond words and the vastness of their contradictions, I have spent my life sleeping in a room dubbed a master bedroom. The associations with slavery and inequality between the sheets, failing conveniently to register. But when I invited you for a meal and said I've been slaving over a hot stove all day, and you said, you can't say that, it was the beginning of my radical transformation. Later, when I offered you a ride home and apologized for my car looking ghetto, you rolled your eyes as if I had just volunteered I'd been on Ancestry.com and discovered I was 2% Nigerian. Growing up, the only non-white person I saw was one who delivered our vegetables. Each Friday before he pulled up in his ramshackle truck, my mother hacked down the opium poppies that proliferated in our English garden. She worried he would smoke them and obliterate his life. There were also the garbage men, what sanitary engineers were called back then, the turbaned men from the British Raj. I was warned not to make eye contact lest they snatch me away and force-feed me foreign curries in a bungalow in Esquimalt. I still can't go to Esquimalt. I know quite a few of the writers who live there, but when we were growing up in Victoria, we did not go to Esquimalt. It was the other side of the tracks. Quite a lovely part of town now. When I was 15, I took sailing lessons at the Royal Victoria Yacht Club. I met a boy who'd come all the way from La Jolla for a regatta, but when I told him I couldn't afford to ride the bus home because I'd been Jewed out of my allowance, he began to weep. I had no idea what I said was so wrong until he enlightened me. I felt gypped. How could I have been so indoctrinated? Gypped and gypsy are verboten. Can I even say verboten without evoking the Holocaust? When I flew to California to resume our summer romance, my boy's mother fled to Arizona. She'd rather die of heat stroke, she said, than see a shiksa squander her son's investments. Aren't we always othering somebody? Black male, black guard, blackguard, black sheep, blacklist, blackout, the absence of white. At a cricket game in Stanley Park, my grandfather said the batter put up a frightful black, meaning he'd made a serious, if not lynch-worthy, mistake. In Coconut Grove, two bros passed me on a crosswalk, looked right through me, and one said, "You're so white, I bet you don't go out at night." I thought he was referring to my absence of a tan. I was that worldly. Experience is the most brutal teacher, C.S. Lewis wrote, but you learn, by God, you learn. You taught me to pay attention to a lifetime of words, their origins inseparable from the feelings they have created. I learned just because I don't know what I say is hurtful doesn't eliminate your pain of having to hear it. When I lie awake in the dying of the light, terrified of what I don't know, afraid of the darkening shadows, I close my eyes and dream of your lips forming the words I finally allow myself to hear, until sleep drops me back into a familiar world, the color of a white raven's mind, namely black. Thanks very much. So in the interest of moving, because I guess we're a bit late, I'm not going to take any questions, but please find me here, and if you have questions. I always think, do people ask Leonard Cohen after a concert, will he take questions, or Mick Jagger after? But I'm not exactly Leonard Cohen or Mick Jagger. It's odd sometimes, the question thing. But I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to. I just I want to make sure you all get to your dinners on time and come back here for more readings, I guess. So I will leave it at that. But thank you again for listening.